In today's video, I'm going to show you how to run a report that gives you a transaction log in Xero. So why would you want to look at a transaction log in Xero? Well, here's an example when I used it recently. I was in a Xero demo company. I was creating some transactions that I was going to use for a video. I wasn't really paying attention. I created a transaction and then I couldn't actually remember what I'd done. So I wanted to go and look at my transaction log. You also might want to do this if somebody else has created a transaction and you want to check what they've actually entered. Now, a lot of people wouldn't realize that Xero has a transaction log because, well, actually it doesn't, but it has a report that you can use to see a log of your transactions. The report in Xero is called the journal report. So let's head into Xero and I'll show you how to use the journal report if you want to look at a log of the transactions that you've entered. But before we do, if you like the content that I create, it would be great if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and you'll get notified when new videos are uploaded on a regular basis. So we're going to go to the reports menu, no surprise. And the report I want is called a journal report. The easiest way is probably to go to the spyglass and key in the word journal. But if we scroll down, I'll show you where it is. It's not obvious. It's in the taxes and balances section, and this is the report that I'm going to go to, the journal report. So journal is an accounting term, and often we will post what we call manual journals for anything that you can't get into your accounts by other means. So it's not a purchase invoice, it's not a sales invoice, it's not a bank transaction. An example when you would use a manual journal is depreciation. But all transactions in your accounting system are actually called journals. They're just not called manual journals. So if you think that the journal report is actually a report of all your transactions. So it's a transaction log, if you like. So let's take a look at what's on here. Well, first of all, we can see there's nothing on here. The default in this report is going to show me any transactions that I have entered dated the current month, which is the month of April. The date today is the 1st of April, and I've been entering transactions dated last month, March 2022. So it's no surprise that there's nothing appearing dated April. So to find the transactions that I'm looking for, I'm going to need to go back a month. So I'm going to go back to the 1st of March and I'm going to update. Now this is the date of the transaction that I've entered. If I didn't know the date that I'd entered, I could choose the date years ago, which will take me right back to all my transactions. So what am I going to find on this report? So it's going to show me a log of all transactions in Xero with these dates from March to the 30th of April. Now if I change it to the 31st of March, it'll give me the same result. How do I want this report sorted? Well, journal ID, what does that mean? To a user, it doesn't really mean anything, but every time there's a transaction logged in Xero, Xero gives it a log number, a transaction ID. So here we have here ID 173. So because it says journal ID, we're going to find the transactions in the order that they've been processed, they've been entered in Xero. So if you remember, the reason I'm looking at this report is I entered something in Xero and I couldn't actually remember what I'd done. So when I go to this report, at the very top of it, as long as my dates are right, this ID 173 is the most recent transaction that I've entered. So what does it tell me here? It tells me an ID number. It tells me the contact and it tells me who posted it. So it was posted by me and this is the date that it was posted, the date it was entered in Xero. Now it doesn't tell me an awful lot, but it tells me the accounting entry. So it tells me the debits and the credits. So it tells me that there was a credit to accounts payable, a debit to VAT and a debit to a cost. Now I do remember that I entered a purchase invoice, I entered a bill. We also know the date of the transaction was the 1st of March. So if I wanted to look at that transaction, it's a little bit convoluted, but if I go to the cost and click on the blue, it'll let me drill down. But then I need to remember it was the month of March, and if I go to this £800 in the month of March, it will take me into my transaction. So yes, it's a bit convoluted, but if you want to track transactions that have been entered in Xero, and they might not just be transactions that you've entered. So for example, in real life, if I had a member of staff, a bookkeeper entering transactions for me, and I wanted to check what they'd actually done, what the last transaction they'd entered, I would find it on this report and it would tell me who had entered the transaction. So it's not the greatest of reports, but if you're trying to find a transaction that you've possibly recently entered, you're trying to find the log of your transactions, this is the report that I would use, the journal report in Xero. I hope you find that a useful tip how to find your transaction log in Xero. I'll be back soon with another video, but until then, happy Xeroing.